In the previous video, we looked at how to create a play blast in Maya. Remember that a play blast is a render. It's a video render where you can see your animations, where you can see the movement in your Maya scenes. But it's more of a working render rather than a high quality render. So in this video, we'll take a look at some techniques for creating a better quality render. So one thing I like to do in my Maya files is create a camera dedicated to rendering. You'll notice in my Maya scene here that I have my four default cameras, my perspective, front, side, and top cameras here. And in fact, here are the four different views. We've got our perspective, top, front, and side. Now I could render from any one of these windows, and I could use my perspective window, for instance, to create this render. But I personally prefer to keep my perspective window as more of a working camera, and therefore what I do to create a dedicated camera for rendering is go to Create, Cameras, Camera. This will create a new camera, which in this case I'm going to call Render Camera. Now to look through that camera, I'll simply select any one of these viewports. In this case, I'll select the top viewport, and I'll go to Panels, Perspective, and you'll find the render camera there. So I'll select that camera, and then go ahead and place the camera where I want to render it from. And for the time being, I'll say that this is good. Now, one thing about this camera here is that it is in the position where it's going to render it from, if I were to hit render now, but we actually don't know where the borders are for my composition here, because I could come in here in my working view, and if I drag this up here like that or like this, you can see that it changes, but this has nothing to do with the actual render size. And if we want to know what that's going to be, the best thing to do is to click on this button here, and this will show us what our render size currently is set to, which right now is 1280 by 720, and it will show us the borders of our composition. This will allow me to, as I scrub through the animation, I want to make sure, for instance, that if I were to position it like this, I want to make sure that the animation doesn't get cut off on these borders. So I'm going to go ahead and bring it in a little bit, maybe like that, and make sure that everything is framed well. And I think this works fine. Now, again, my reason for wanting to have a dedicated camera for my render as opposed to using my perspective window is that I like to keep this perspective window as a working camera that I can move around and not lose any of the work I put into actually positioning and setting up my camera. The only thing is, if I come in here, I can accidentally, if I start rotating, moving around in that view, lose this position here. So what I like to do is bookmark this camera position. Within the viewport here, you'll see that there's this icon that looks like a bookmark. It looks like a ribbon. And if I click on that, it'll save this view. So now, if I were to come in here and let's say I accidentally started moving things around, I can come over to View, Bookmarks, and here's my bookmark right here, Camera View 1. If I click on that, it'll go right back to the original position of the camera. And in fact, I could set up multiple bookmarks if I like. Maybe I might explore this angle for my camera, in which case I can bookmark it, and then come over to View, bookmarks, and then I can switch between my different camera views. Now, you're already familiar with creating a play blast from the earlier video, and you know that the play blast is going to give you something that more or less looks like what you see in your working view. So we know that the background with a play blast is going to be this very neutral gray here. But this, in fact, has nothing to do with what it's going to look like if I actually render it out. You can see here my background is black. The background can be set by selecting your camera and then opening up the attribute editor. And in the attribute editor, with the camera selected, you'll find environment, and you can change your background color here. So for instance, if I wanted something blue, kind of a dark blue, I could set it to that. And if I render it out, you'll see that my background will be that dark blue, that kind of slate blue that I have here. I'm going to go ahead and keep it black for my render, but just understand that you can change the background color by selecting the camera, going to the attribute editor, and then finding the environment section for the camera. Now, to create our video render, we're going to need to go here to our render settings. It's the icon that looks like a clapboard with a gear on it. And if I click on that, our render settings will open up, and we can take a look at some of the different properties we need to set for our render. First of all, I'm going to want to give my render a name. I'm going to call it neon sign. And we need to determine what image format we want to render it as. Now, I want to make a video, so I'm going to select AVI. In addition, for this particular example, we need to determine what our frame range will be. Our starting frame and our end frame. Now you'll notice in my timeline I have it going from frame 1 to 100, but here in my render settings it's only set from frame 1 to 10, 1 to 10. So in other words, it'll only render out 10 frames of animation. If I want to render out this whole timeline, I need to set my end frame to 100. Now you remember a little earlier I created my own camera to render from. However, I need to tell the render settings to use that camera. Currently, my renderable camera is set to the perspective camera, and if I render it out, that's the camera that will get rendered out. So I need to go to the drop-down and select render camera, the camera that I created, the camera that I intend to do my render from. Image size is where you'll set up the size of your render. In this case, I'm using the preset HD 720, which will create a video that is 1280 pixels wide by 720 pixels high. If we wanted to change that, however, we've got a number of different options that we can select from. In fact, you can use these presets, or you can just type in exact values under the width and height right here. I'm going to stick with the HD 720 for this example here. Something else that you'll want to keep in mind is where are you saving your video to? And if you've set up a project, it should go into the images folder of that project. If you haven't set up a project, it will probably go to a default project. The important thing is that you need to know where your video is going to go. And you will find that here under path. In this case, you can see that my video will be going into my CMT229 project in a folder called Images. The next place that we'll take a look at is here under the Maya Software tab. And because I'm using Maya Software, this is where I'm going to find the different properties for the Maya Software render. And if I select it, what I want to do is change the quality as well as the edge anti-aliasing. Currently it's set to custom and low quality, but I will set it to production quality. This will give us a better looking render. And now that I've set all these different parameters, we are ready to render. So now that I've set this, I'm going to close the render settings. Now at this point, I would recommend that you save your Maya scene. That way you won't have to, if the computer were to crash or if the software were to crash, you're not going to lose that work that you just did in setting up your render. Great. So I have saved my file and now I'm ready to render. And here's what we'll do. I'm going to come over here to this drop down, and instead of modeling, I'll switch it to rendering. And then I will go to render, batch render. And when I'm ready to render, I'll go ahead and just click on batch render. And it'll begin the rendering process. The rendering process may take a little while. You can look down here at this field right here, and you can see it says that it's rendering with Maya Software, although it hasn't actually begun yet. Now it's begun. You can see that it's working and doing its render. At this point, it's just wait and let it do its thing. Wait until it finishes. So my render has finished, and in fact you can see that in this field down here. It says that the rendering completed. In addition, we could also open what is called the script editor, found here in the lower right corner. And there you will also see that the render has finished. Although I think that we're not seeing it because I'm recording this video. Oh, there we go. You'll see in the script editor also it indicates that the rendering has been completed. And also I can tell here the exact path of where it created my AVI render. What we'll do now is take a look at that render. I'm going to navigate to my project that I have here, to the image folder, and find the AVI. So my render's been completed, and I have navigated to the folder, the images folder in my project to find it. Here it is. Here's my neon sign AVI. You can see that it's an AVI. You can see that the file size is quite large. It's slightly over 360,000 kilobytes. Very typical for a video file to be large like that. Let's right click on it, open it up, in this case with Windows Media Player, and take a look at the render. Now, large file sizes for videos can of course be problematic if you're trying to share these videos with others. There are a number of different ways and there's a number of different software out there for compressing video to take a large video file like this and make it considerably smaller without hopefully too much of a loss of quality. I'm going to show you one way today that you can take a video that you render out in Maya and make it a lower file size, a smaller file. Okay, so the example I'm going to show you is using some software which I downloaded called Handbrake. And we'll take a look at that. I'm going to use this software, which you could also find online, download, install, and you could use Handbrake also to compress your files. Let's take a look at that. So here I am with this Handbrake software open, and I'm in the folder with the AVI that I wish to compress. Remember that this is 360,000 kilobytes right now. What I will do is I will select my file and drag it into here onto the or drop a file or folder here field. So let's just select it, drag it in here. Here it is. You can see that it actually wants to crop my video here, and I don't want that. So I'm going to go to Dimensions, and I'm going to change the anamorphic from automatic to none. And I'm going to manually, I'm going to tell it not to keep the aspect ratio, and I'm going to set the dimensions to the dimensions of my original video file, 1280 by 720. Now that I've done that, I don't want it to get cropped, so I'm going to select Custom, and I'm just going to get rid of these cropping values here. Now we're almost ready to compress this. The only thing I would point out is that you need to make sure you know where you're saving it to. Or you need to set it to a specific location, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to set it to the same place, the same folder as the original AVI is. So I'll just navigate there very quickly. And here we are. I'll go ahead and save. As you can see, I've got my new path here. And now I will do the start encode. And here is our new video file. You can see that this one is actually a M4V file. But notice, most importantly, the difference in file size here. This one is slightly over 360,000 kilobytes. This one is only 175 kilobytes. Let's take a look and see how it looks. I'll right-click on it. Once again, open it up with Windows Media Player, and here is my video file. Considerably smaller file size, but the quality looks pretty good. So I hope that this video's been useful for you, that it helps you render out movie files in Maya. Thank you for watching.